My name is Mary Phaeton. I'm your host this morning, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here with you at this year's National Reconciliation Week virtual breakfast, beaming right around our state and beyond. I join you today as a committed reconciliation ally, and I'm honoured to host such an important event. Be brave, make change is the theme for National Reconciliation Week 2022, and we will explore it deeply throughout this morning's program. But what a theme to make us laser focused on the work still to be done. And what an amazing week it's been with such positive reconciliation sentiment flowing from our new federal government. This morning, we are delighted to be broadcasting from this year's National Reconciliation Week hub at WA Museum Boulevard. We start this morning with 4 welcomes to country from elders representing just a few of our nations around this vast state. As you know, the many nations within the state of Western Australia have diverse language and stories tied to country and kin. We've invited a small number of nations to join us today to welcome you to country in language. In future years, we look forward to welcoming many more nations as we celebrate the diversity and survival of culture and language. We'll now cross to Noongar elder Uncle Richard Walley at Katakumba, Kings Park. Then we'll head north to Yaru elder Dianne Appleby at Gunfiam Point Beach in Broome. Then to our Midwest with Yamaji elder Derek Councillor at Point Moore Lighthouse in Geraldton. And finally, we head east to Wongatha elder Aubrey Lynch at Currawong Community in Kalgoorlie. First to Uncle Richard Walley.
Kuop Kerala, Kaya. Nunak jeningan ngala mort poja, wajak poja, nunak jeningan nyonga poja, kop poja kayawa. Mama jenang nunak bodoan nunak wotko nunak karajan wangin. Bau bodoan nunak wotko nunak karak nunak poja nunak mort. Mama jenang nunak kayawa. Ngala koromot jeningan ngala yai. Ngala jerep jenang nunak kayawa. Good day. May the good spirit watch over us as we go about our business today, as we converse, as we interact with each other and share stories. And at the end of the day, may the good spirit take each and every one of you safely back to your families. We're here at Kings Park. It's a place of significance. We call it Katakumba as one of the many names that it has. And I'll do a song linking this place to every song line within this great state and this great country. This song's called Jeningan Bo. It's looking in the distance. May we look in the distance for a great future for each and every one of us. Kaiwa. Jeningan Bo, Jeningan Bo, Kara Murda, Jeningan Bo, Kara Kumba, Jeningan Bo, Ngara Boja, Jeningan Bo, Jeningan Bo, Jeningan Bo, Jeningan Bo. Jeningan Bo, Mama Jenangala, Jeningan Bo, Mama Jenangala, Jeningan Bo, Ngala Boja, Jeningan Bo, Jeningan Bo. Kaya, Mama Jenang, Nunak, Mama Jenangala, Kayawa. May the good spirit watch over you. May the good spirit watch over all of us. Kayawa.
Ngadi Gurjin, hello everyone. Ngayo Nilawal Dianne Appleby, and welcome to the beautiful part of the West Kimberley region. We call this country Ruby Bee. This is Broome, Western Australia. Galamabu Gurbulan, Jarair, Gun Gabungan, Banu Gabungan, Gular Gabungan, Yalman Gabungan. We welcome you from all the different destinations that you've come to Broome, from the north, east, south, and the west. This is a beautiful part of the country, and we're very proud of it. Gala Yagaranyan Gurir Yarungan Buru. Welcome to Yarrow country. Kalawiri Yangan Ngaran Jungaralian Nyambaburu Jaida Yarrow. We are happy for you to come to our country. You are welcome. Nyambaburu Jaida Yarungan Ngarangunil Bugarigara Nyuran Mangara. Forever and forever, this Yarrow country is here for us, for all of us, and we share it for Janma, for Wiria, for Ranga, for Nyamba Buru Mabu Lian Buru. Galea.
Yindabari, Nagajo Daragi, Nagajo Nyamaji, Nagajo Nagaja, Maskin Millinga, Bana Yindabalam coming on to today, Nagaja, Southern Nyamaji Bana. Hello, I introduce myself as Daragi. Daragi, that's my Aboriginal name, my Nyamaji name. But then I identified I was from the Nyamaji Nation. But in that nation I belong to a tribe called the Nagaja people. We identified the ground where we're on today. We traditionally call this area home. But also we come under the Southern Nyamaji. Now the Southern Nyamaji is made up of 6 different groups. We have the Nanagari, Willinyu, Amugu. We also have Nagaja, Wiradjuri and Kamilaroi. We make up the Southern Nyamaji. This year, in the spirit of reconciliation, us people, we come together and we're waiting for this to get done. Come and join us. You know, reconciliation is a way forward for all of us. But we as Nyamaji people, we say, when you come on Nyamaji land and you're visiting and walking around, we like to say, if you come with an open and accepting heart, this land, its people, and the spirits will treat you with kindness. Thank you and welcome.
My name's Aubrey Lynch. I'm from the Goldfields area. I'm a Wangata person, an Aboriginal elder. And my background, I'm one of the children that was taken away from their parents and placed in a home way back in the 40s. And my upbringing is all around the Mount Margaret area. And of course, I'm a Wangata person, and I'm very proud of it. And I speak the language very well. And we can communicate with each other still. And in skin grouping, we've got skin grouping in our area. And I'm a Boronga man. My mother's a Panaga. And she passed on now, but I'm still around talking language still, where my mother left off. She was a good teacher during my time, and she taught me how to even pronounce a word properly. And I'm still continuing the work that she left with me. And on behalf of all our Wangata people, I'd like to do it in language, invite you in language and in English. So ngailu, on behalf of all ngailu Wangata people, ngailu kuari pokolaringo, nora kuari pitango ngali pakangoragoto. And in English, I'd like to say that on behalf of all our Wangata people, I give you a warm welcome to Calgary. And I hope your few days here in Calgary will be an enjoyable one for you all, you know. So in English, I'd like to say again, I welcome you all to Calgary and Boulder.
Thank you for those generous welcomes to country. A strong reminder we are on country that has been cared for by Aboriginal people for at least 60,000 years. Thank you to the elders for this powerful welcome this morning. It's a pleasure to be joined by Reconciliation WA CEO Jodie Nunn. Morning, Jodie.
Hi, Mary, and yes, what a powerful way to start this morning's program. Can I also acknowledge all elders, past, present, and those who are still to walk alongside across all our nations. It is great to honour to share your nations with you, and thank you for the stories and welcomes today. And a huge welcome to everyone who's joined us this morning. The response has been incredible. I would also like to extend greetings from our co-chair, Carol Innes. Unfortunately, just yesterday, like many West Australians, she tested positive to COVID, so she has been unable to join us today. We send our warm regards to Carol and wish her well, and everyone resting at home today for a speedy recovery.
Jodie, I understand the Reconciliation WA team has actually transformed the National Reconciliation Week offering this year. What would you like to tell us about what we can expect?
Yes, Reconciliation WA had to really challenge ourselves to be brave, as we're asking everyone else to be. Our big shift is to make sure we are being truly West Australian, not just Boorloo or Perth-centric. We are, after all, Reconciliation WA. And our breakfast today is beaming virtually right round all corners of our state, bringing together so many West Australians. And I believe we have allies joining us from beyond our borders as well. From the Pindan of the Kimberley to the white sandy coasts of our Great Southern, to our thriving city on the banks of the Derbyl-Yerrigan here in Boorloo. We are here together, and I want you to know that you're all being welcomed as a community of reconciliation allies. It was of great importance that this year's event extended its usual reach to ensure it is more inclusive and accessible to you all. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely craving more community and unity rather than isolation and face masks after the last 24 months. So here we are, together, and we welcome everybody. Going virtual has also meant that this year we can ambitiously invite 1 million West Australians to join us to this morning's 2022 breakfast, by far our biggest Reconciliation Week event to date. So a big shout out to the many of hundreds of local and state government teams, businesses, schools, community groups, and even those working from home for joining us today.
Fantastic, Jodie. So I hope you've got a hot cuppa in hand and you're about to be part of a milestone event. Let's settle in for a wonderful morning of reconciliation discussions and no doubt some challenging conversations as well. Jodie, obviously this doesn't happen without the support of partners to Reconciliation WA.
Thank you indeed. Our partners are absolutely crucial to us achieving our vision to bring National Reconciliation Week out to you all. And I'd like to acknowledge the contribution of our partners, BHP, Woodside, St John of God Healthcare, our major supporter Lottery West, our event partner and National Reconciliation Week hub, the WA Museum, Walley, our regional partners, the WA Local Government Association, and the state government through the Department for Premier and Cabinet. Thank you also to the Aboriginal fashion label, Kirikin, for the beautiful scarves we have the pleasure of wearing today. We thank you all for supporting our collective ambition for National Reconciliation Week 2022 and beyond.
Yes, thank you to all of the partners, and thank you to the Reconciliation WA board and team as well for your leadership. I know there's lots more happening throughout the week as well, Jodie, and we will be discussing that later in the program.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary, and everyone, please enjoy the program ahead.
We're now going to take you on a virtual journey through our National Reconciliation Week hub, WA Museum Walley, and visit some of the stunning collections on site. If you haven't been as yet, the next week is your chance as the museum celebrates National Reconciliation Week. What a treat. Throughout the week, WA Museum Walley and their regional museum network have an amazing lineup of activities and activations. You can visit their website for further information, including Be Brave, Make Change museum tours. I'd now like to introduce Minister Tony Buti, Western Australia's Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, to make his speech.
Kayu Watja. Hello, welcome. I'd like to acknowledge the Wadja Noongar people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and extend my respects to Aboriginal elders and leaders throughout the state as we are joined virtually throughout the day. Thank you to Dr. Richard Walley, Dianne Appleby, Derek Councillor and Aubrey Lynch for the welcome to country. Can I also acknowledge Reconciliation WA co-chairs Carol Innes, who unfortunately can't be with us today, and Gary Smith and fellow board members, Reconciliation members and champions, and all supporting Western Australians in attendance today. Today's Reconciliation WA virtual breakfast seeks to connect with 1 million Western Australians. Reconciliation is everyone's business, and that's why we are here today. All individuals, families, communities, organisations and governments have a role to play in supporting a reconciled Australia. Last year, National Reconciliation Week encouraged all Australians to take action, not just in National Reconciliation Week, but every week of the year. That spirit continues this year with the reconciliation theme, Be Brave, Make Change. It urges a more courageous reconciliation movement, calling for all of us to be more ambitious in the actions we take to have a greater and more lasting impact. While some of us here live and breathe reconciliation, for others it is a new and daunting concept. Reconciliation can be a vague concept, often invoked as an idea rather than as a concrete strategy, with clear milestones to achieve the desired outcome. The notion of reconciliation has been imbued with a variety of meanings, depending on whether it is being discussed from a legal, political or cultural perspective. Among my legal colleagues, and yes, even some friends in that cohort, one understanding of reconciliation is making formerly incompatible rights compatible. It views reconciliation as a process of recognising Indigenous rights and reconciling those rights with countervailing interests. To others, namely Dr. Wiradjuri O'Donoghue, it means, and I quote, "We have a long way to go, but there is no turning back. For Indigenous Australians, the acid test of reconciliation will be improved health, better housing, education and employment. Reconciliation is the way of the future, our shared future with which Australia is united as one people with many rich cultures and a commitment to justice and equity. Together, we can build a remarkable country, the envy of the rest of the world." To realise that ambition, there is a need for the Australian legal and political system to strive to assist the relationship between Australia and non-Aboriginal Australia. An important start is by giving greater consideration to reconciliation with enacting and interpreting laws. The judiciary has a role to play here when interpreting the laws, but in the enactment of laws, it is parliamentarians that must take the lead. And it is the executive government that is crucial in providing leadership in the development of laws and policies that assist with reconciliation and improving the social economic situation of our First Nations people. In carrying forward this challenge, but also this opportunity, the Western Australian Government is working towards better social, economic, health and cultural outcomes for Aboriginal people. Released in 2021, our Aboriginal Empowerment Strategy aligns with the ethos espoused by Dr. O'Donoghue. It provides a framework for the state government policies, plans, initiatives and programs that will contribute to better outcomes for Aboriginal people. Central to this genuine partnership and engagement with Aboriginal stakeholders, strong accountability and culturally responsible ways of working. Developed in partnership with the Aboriginal Advisory Council of WA, the strategy sets out the ways that the WA Government will work with Aboriginal Western Australians towards a future in which all Aboriginal people, families and communities are empowered to live good lives and choose their own futures for a secure foundation. It represents a chance for new beginnings in some areas and for consolidation and improvement of what is currently working well in others. It is also a brave challenge to government to work better, one which I do not shy away from as a Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. In my lifetime, we have come a long way, but our work is far from done. Reconciliation is an ongoing journey. I believe that challenge is there for all of us, including for government to be braver and more courageous in the way we approach reconciliation. Actions speak louder than words, and we all need to commit to being bolder in advancing reconciliation between our First Nations peoples and the wider WA community through real and meaningful reforms. I give you my commitment to do just that. As we walk towards the future, it is essential that our First Nations people are our partners. Let's journey together as Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Western Australians, embracing the values of respect, deep trust, care and integrity, and telling our whole story to create a share and reconcile future for Western Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for sharing your story and insights. And you're right, actions do speak louder than words, and it will be amazing to see the progress we can make over the next 12 months. National Reconciliation Week is a time for all Australians to learn about our shared histories, cultures and achievements, and to explore how each of us can contribute to achieving reconciliation in Australia. Held annually from May 27 to June 3, these dates commemorate two significant milestones in our reconciliation journey: the successful 1967 referendum and the High Court Mabo decision. National Reconciliation Week began as the week of prayer for reconciliation in 1993. It landed in the same year as the International Year of the World's Indigenous Peoples. 3 years later, in 1996, the Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation launched Australia's first National Reconciliation Week. In 2000, approximately 300,000 people walked across Sydney Harbour Bridge as part of National Reconciliation Week. Australians from across the country showed support by walking across bridges in their own hometowns and cities. In 2001, Reconciliation Australia was established to continue to provide national leadership on reconciliation. Reconciliation must live in the hearts and minds and ongoing actions of all Australians. It is a story of hearts and heads uniting. Together, we can move forward, creating a nation that is strengthened by respectful relationships between the wider Australian community and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Today, hundreds of businesses, schools, early learning centres, organisations and individuals from all across our state are hosting events, activities or simply acknowledging their commitment to National Reconciliation Week in their own way. Thank you to each and every individual and team who has created a breakfast as we unite across the state and the country for the same reason. I would now like to introduce Stan Grant, today's keynote speaker, who couldn't be here today with us in person, so is sharing his message with us from Gadigal land in Sydney. Stan Grant is a Wiradjuri man with a career spanning more than 30 years in broadcast radio, television news and current affairs. Stan is a well-known Australian journalist and writer, respected for articulating Indigenous issues and politics. Welcome, Stan Grant.
Yiradu marang badadu Wiradjuri gibi ajira maralinya badu Wiradjuri UND Wongama Yinjimara Gadigal Nurumba. In my own language, I've welcomed you here and paid respects to the Gadigal people, that we are on Gadigal land. Also paid respects to my own ancestry, Wiradjuri people of central western New South Wales, and my Wiradjuri name, Wongama. It's good to be able to welcome you in my language. It's important to me. It's an important part of my own identity and my own culture. I want to pay respects to the people of the lands from wherever you're joining us today, to your elders, past, present and emerging. And thank you to Reconciliation WA for putting on this event and asking me to speak to you. It's a real honour and a pleasure to be able to do this during Reconciliation Week. That language that I spoke to you, Wiradjuri language, I want to tell you a little bit of a story about that and how that language has come to be revived in Australia. When my father was a young boy, he was the 1940s, living in a small outback town in New South Wales. His grandfather, my great-grandfather, Dianne, yelled out to him in the main street of the town in Wiradjuri language, the language that I've spoken to you. He yelled out to come home quick. A policeman overheard him and arrested him. He was taken to jail for speaking his language in his country. His charge was offensive language. When my great-grandfather came out of jail, he said to my father that he wouldn't speak that language to him again in the street. He wouldn't speak it to him again in the town, that he would only speak that language to my father out in the bush. And my father spent many years with his grandfather learning about our culture, learning our language, learning about our animal totem, the magpie, the guru, in our language. My father never forgot those lessons. When he grew up, many, many years later, a linguist came to him and asked my father if he could write down the Wiradjuri language, how many words he could remember. My father said, "No, we'll do it together. We'll work together on this project." My father went back and studied linguistics. He and the linguist John Rudder spent hours every night, year after year, writing down the language, travelling around Wiradjuri country, picking up different words. In the end, they compiled the first Wiradjuri dictionary, the first time that this ancient language had been written down. They set up language centres across Wiradjuri country, across central western New South Wales. With Charles Sturt University, they established the first postgraduate studies program in Aboriginal languages at any university in Australia. Today, there is up to a 3-year waiting list just to get in and do that course to learn Wiradjuri language. I asked my father when he started to teach the language, would he teach it to non-Aboriginal people? And he said, "Yes, I will. You don't have to be Wiradjuri," he said, "to speak our language, because language doesn't tell you who you are, it tells you where you are." Think about that idea for a moment. Not who you are, but where you are. We're so used to being asked, aren't we, who are you? What do you do? But amongst ourselves, amongst Aboriginal people, we ask, where are you from? Who are your people? People of the land. We belong to a place. We don't belong to ourselves. Where are you? Not who are you? My father was ultimately awarded a doctorate from Charles Sturt University and then an Order of Australia medal for saving this language for a new generation to speak. There's an amazing story when you think that my father's grandfather, my great-grandfather, was jailed for speaking his language, a language that my father has helped to keep alive and is then given an Order of Australia medal in recognition of that work. It shows how far we've come, but it also tells us something about our struggle and the courage that is needed to keep ourselves alive, keep our culture alive, keep our languages alive in this country. I often think of that work that John Rudder, the linguist, and my father did together as a symbol, an example of what reconciliation means. People who can come together from different cultures in this country, who can work together, who can find a new way of seeing themselves in each other with respect and with justice, but understanding as well that the true culture, the true language of this country is First Nations culture, First Nations language. The bravery that was required to make that change, to keep that language alive, is what Reconciliation Week this year is all about. Be brave, make a change. When I think of that bravery, I think about the struggle of our people for more than 2 centuries. I think about those Gweagal warriors who came down to the shore when Captain Cook's Endeavour sailed past Botany Bay, and how they shook their fists and their spears at him and they yelled at him to go away, and how Captain Cook, before he had set foot on this land, opened fire on those people. Aboriginal blood was spilled on this soil before the British had set foot ashore. I think about the struggle of people like Pemulwuy, the great Darug warrior who fought the British for 12 years, fought the British to a standstill. At times they believed the colony itself would not survive. He saw off 3 different governors, and still the battle continued. Finally, he was captured and killed, beheaded, and his head sent back to England as a trophy of victory. His head still remains somewhere lost in the British Museum, still separated from his land and his people. It reminds me of the story of your great warrior in Western Australia, Yagan, who, just like Pemulwuy, fought the invaders of his land, and just like Pemulwuy, lost his head sent to England, until you, with your bravery and your courage, maintained the struggle to bring him home. That's the struggle of our people. That's what lives in all of us today. I think about the struggle of Wiradjuri, the great Wiradjuri warrior, who also, like Yagan, like Pemulwuy, fought the British after they invaded his lands after the crossing of the Blue Mountains. During the 1820s, a war was fought around Bathurst, west of the Blue Mountains, that was reported in the newspaper of the time, just like we report the wars of today, just like Ukraine or Syria or Yemen. At the time, it was reported as a war of extermination. Martial law was declared against the Wiradjuri people, the first time it had happened on this soil. Wiradjuri people could be and were shot on sight. After 3 years of waging war, Wiradjuri gathered together the huddled survivors of that conflict and led them on a trek across the Blue Mountains into Parramatta to sit down with the governor of the day. The Sydney Gazette reported that Wiradjuri walked into that meeting wearing a felt hat, and written on the brim of the hat was the word peace. What an incredible display of courage and bravery. The bravery to make a stand and the bravery to make change. That lives on in us. I think of the struggles of the 20th century. I think of the 1938 day of mourning, when Aboriginal people didn't celebrate the 150th anniversary of the coming of the British, but instead gathered together in protest to petition the government to recognise our rights as the first people of this country, to recognise us truly as citizens of this country. The spirit of those people from the day of mourning passed on to those who led us to the 1967 referendum. Still today, the most resoundingly successful referendum in Australian history. Then Australians were being asked to vote to count us in the census, to count us among the population of Australia. When the Constitution was first written, we were written out. Aboriginal people did not count. Australians, of course, voted yes, that we would be counted among them, but that wasn't the end of the fight. A new generation of First Nations warriors led a new struggle. We saw the freedom rides led by Charles Perkins, campaigning to desegregate outback New South Wales, to allow Aboriginal people to swim in the swimming pools and attend the cinemas. I think of the tent embassy set up on the lawns outside the old Parliament House that said that we are foreigners in our own country. We are refugees in our own country. That we have never ceded our sovereignty. And 50 years later, that tent embassy remains, still holding Australia to account for who we are, to truly see us as who we are. I think of Eddie Mabo and the remarkable struggle of that man, to struggle to overturn the myth of terra nullius, that this was not an empty land. It wasn't free for the taking, that this belonged to us. It belonged to Eddie Mabo. Eddie Mabo believed the land passed to him from his father and his grandfather should be passed to his family too. He fought all the way through the courts of Queensland, losing at every turn. He took his battle to the highest court in the land, the High Court in Canberra. He didn't live long enough to see the final outcome. But of course we know that today as the Mabo decision, the single most important judgment in Australian legal history, that recognised that this is our land, that Captain Cook did not wipe away our rights to our country when he planted a British flag in the soil, that our rights existed before that and continue to exist today. That struggle doesn't end, of course. It's passed again to another generation, and we see the struggle for treaties. We see the struggle for recognition in the Constitution. And we are reminded that Australia is the only Commonwealth country not to recognise Aboriginal people in the Constitution, not to to have signed treaties with First Nations people. How different it is to New Zealand. Of course, New Zealand has its own problems. But the Treaty of Waitangi is the foundation document of that land. When they sing their anthem in both languages. When they do the haka, Pākehā and Māori people do the haka together. That there is dual naming of places, that there are seats in Parliament for Māori people, that the recognition that that is Māori land continues today. And yet in Australia we continue to lag the rest of the world in fully recognising the rights of First Nations people. The struggle of our warriors, the struggle for those who fought and died in the frontier wars that we still don't teach about, continues in all of us and challenges all of us today. I think about the Uluru Statement from the heart. And I think about those brave people who pulled themselves together, overcame their own lack of trust, their own lack of faith in a country that has let us down time and time again, to ask this country to walk with us on a new beginning. I think about that call for a voice in the Constitution, that we're no longer just counted, that we are heard, and that we get to speak back to what is called the torment of our powerlessness. When I think about that struggle, I think about the women who have led that struggle. I think about people like Pat Anderson. I think about people like Megan Davis, who led a consultative process all around Australia, speaking to Aboriginal organisations, Aboriginal people, trying to pull together some consensus about what the future might look like for us. I think about all those Aboriginal women in my own family, my grandmothers and my aunties, who made me feel what it was to belong to this country, connected me to my culture, connected me to my stories. I think of people like June Oscar from Western Australia, who gave this address just last year and continues in her important work to fight for human rights in our own land. Aboriginal women have been a powerful voice for emancipation in our own country. And that's the challenge of this week, isn't it? Reconciliation Week. Be brave, make a change. But what does reconciliation mean? I'm reminded again of someone from Western Australia, Peter Yu, a powerful voice for our people, who has been heard not just in Western Australia but across the country, who gave a speech at the Australian National University just a few years ago where he challenged the very idea of reconciliation that he said has lost its moral core, its moral purpose, that it became an empty word, a word almost devoid of meaning. Because reconciliation isn't just about weeks like this. It isn't just about a welcome to country or acknowledgement to country. It isn't about saying sorry. It is all of those things, but it is much more. It's about truth, and it's about justice, and it's about real recognition of our place in this country. And it asks more of all of us. Right now, our world is being challenged in ways that perhaps may have been unimaginable just a short time ago. Think about the war in Ukraine and how that has shocked us to our core, has challenged all of us to think about what global conflict might look like again. We are talking today about the potential of World War III. We are talking today again about the possibility of nuclear war. In Ukraine, as in other parts of the world where people face conflict, people are being asked, what does it mean to be Ukrainian? People who are putting their bodies on the line, standing in front of the might of the Russian army, turning back Russian tanks to defend who they are in the world. And I think about that, and I think about our people and the way that we have struggled in this country, how we fought our wars, how we stood up to the might of the British invading our land, and how we are still today a voice in this country, asking Australians, what does it truly mean to be Australian? What does reconciliation truly mean? We have to bring real substance to this idea of reconciliation. We have to honour the memories of those people who have come before us. We have to live up to Peter Yu's challenge to all of us, to make reconciliation mean something, to give it back its sense of moral purpose. Australian democracy is being challenged as democracies around the world are being challenged right now. What does our democracy mean if after 2 centuries the first people of this land are still the most impoverished and the most imprisoned people in the country? What does that say about our democracy? During the next term of Parliament, we may well be asked to vote in a referendum, to acknowledge Aboriginal people, to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people in our Constitution, to give people a voice. That'll be a test of who we are. Is our democracy just seated in 2 centuries of British settlement? Or does it emerge from something so much deeper? Something that comes from time immemorial. That comes from a people who have always been here. A people who don't ask, who are you? But a people who ask, where are you? That's the question of this week. To live up to that idea of where are you? That we are in Australia. That we are sharing this country together. That what has happened in this land has happened to all of us. That it is our history. And that if reconciliation is going to mean anything, then we need to live up to the traditions of those who have come before us. Those great warriors, men and women, who have fought for this country and are still promising a new future for this country. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are asking Australians to walk with us to a better future. A future where we don't turn away from the past, where we don't silence our voices, but the voices of First Nations people are heard. That's why my father has struggled to keep our language alive, so that our voices can be heard. That's why so many of our languages around Australia are being revived, so that we can speak back in our own languages. In my language, there is a phrase, Yinjamara Winangana. Yinjamara Winangana means to live with respect in a world worth living in. Is that what we're building? Do we truly live with respect in a world worth living in when we have still failed to finish the unfinished business of our country? When Aboriginal voices are still marginalised in our own country? Yinjamara Winangana challenges all of us to build a world for our children and the children to come that honours those who have gone before. That's what this week is about. This week is about recognising those voices and challenging ourselves to be brave and make a change. I want to wish you all the best for the rest of the week in all that you do. May the spirit of all of our ancestors flow through us and challenge all of us and give us the strength to bring our voices to this and make our voices heard, to be able to build a world worth living in. In my language, Mandangur. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan Grant. You're an inspiration and you're helping all of us shift the way we think and act. Your voice is powerful in our national reconciliation journey. Before we take a brief comfort break, we'd love to invite you to submit a photo of your event, which we will share on the screen during the break with our state audience. Please scan the QR code and use the code NRW to share your photo on Events Air. We'll now take a quick comfort break and welcome you back at 9 o'clock. Welcome back and thank you again for joining us at the 2022 National Reconciliation Week breakfast. Now listen up everyone, I have something serious to say. In 2022, it's our year and we want to urge all Australians, individuals, families, schools, communities, organisations and our government to be brave and tackle the unfinished business of reconciliation so we can make change for the benefit of all Australians. For some, that may be educating our children on Australia's true history. For others, supporting Aboriginal staff members to develop into future leaders, everyone can play their part. Seek out where you can make change. That is why the theme of this National Reconciliation Week is Be Brave, Make Change. You can do it, I can do it, we can all do it. We must all champion that reconciliation is everyone's business. We would now like to introduce the talented Karla Hart dancers who have used WA Museum Bulla Bardip as their canvas to share a stunning cultural dance performance with us. Please join me in welcoming the Karla Hart dancers.
Fire was the centre of our universe. We would meet at the fire, sit around the fire, have a warm, cook our food, boil the water for a wash. Old people would lay by the fire. We were always taught from a young age that fire can be very dangerous. You must be very careful when you make a fire. You must make sure that you are protected and the rest of the country is protected. You always clear an area around the fire so that it doesn't spread. Always put out your fire when you're in the bush. Sometimes, when you stare too long in the fire, you can be taken to another place. Sometimes when you stare too long at the fire, it can take you to another place. Gotta win, 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 gotta win. Buddy up, gotta win, buddy up, gotta win, buddy up, gotta win, gotta win, yeah. Gotta win, 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 gotta win. Buddy up, gotta win, buddy up, gotta win, buddy up, gotta win, gotta win, yeah. Gotta win, 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 gotta win. Buddy up, gotta win, buddy up, gotta win, buddy up, gotta win, gotta win.
What a stunning performance. Thank you to Karla Hart and her dancers, and how amazing is Bulla Bardip. Definitely worth a visit if you haven't been here before. And we also have some very special people joining us online today, our young reconciliation champions. Mosman Park Primary School were finalists in the Walley Awards, which is Australia's national awards program recognising and celebrating Australian schools and early language services that implement outstanding reconciliation initiatives. Walley supports schools and early learning services in Australia to develop environments that foster a high level of knowledge and pride in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, cultures and contributions. And right now, Mosman Park Primary School have a very special message for us and want to share some of their school reconciliation projects with us. Can everyone please warmly welcome Mosman Park Primary School with their Year 6 students singing their school song in both English and Noongar.
Welcome to learning, growing, walking on big jam. Learning to win and lose and do the best you can. Our sun rises on the river and it sets into the sea. To the north and south and many places, but no place that I would rather.
Nala Kadij, Wajak Mor, Kain Kara, Wiradjuri. I respectfully acknowledge the past and present traditional custodians of this land, on which we are meeting, the Wajak people. It is a privilege to be standing on Wajak Noongar country. I also acknowledge contributions of Aboriginal Australians and non-Aboriginal Australians to the education of all children and people in this country we all live in and share together, Australia.
I'm Pamela Chatfield. I'm an Associate Principal at Mosman Park Primary School. I've been here for 6 years. This is my 7th year. And it's important, I think, that our kids these days know what we didn't learn when we were kids. And I think that's why a lot of us are passionate about it, because we're angry that we weren't taught about reconciliation. We weren't taught the true history in school, and now we're going to rectify that. We've changed our logo, we've changed our motto. We're changing a lot of the things, the way we do things, because it's important to us to incorporate the full history of our school, because our school's quite an old school in terms of colonial times, but it's an even older place, and our kids need to know that. So we now have, instead of Sterling House, we now have Bellbuck House, and that's really exciting that, you know, we now include everybody in our history. And so our logo has the river and the sea in the trunk of the tree, and the green represents the fig tree, which is at the centre of our school, and it's kind of a symbol of our community. And so in the leaves of the tree as well, there's a symbol of community there as well, with a yarning circle and people sitting around talking together.
I want to say hello and welcome to Noongar Buja. And this is my country, Noongar and Balladong. So I've got the southwest covered, but actually I have the whole of Western Australia covered. As a finalist in the Narragansett Walley Awards in 2021, we were absolutely thrilled. This actually came together where the school and the community got involved, and the students were on a par with us as well. So it was about the language, the culture and the history around Mosman Park Primary School, and we were thrilled, absolutely thrilled, and we're still up in the air.
Well, being a finalist in the Narragansett Walley Awards, it makes me feel proud because people really recognise the Aboriginal culture, and I find it really, really nice that people want to learn more about the Aboriginal culture, and the fact that we're sharing it all around, like around WA, and it might go even further, is really special for our school.
Really shows that we've actually achieved something, and that everyone realises what we're doing, and that they're willing to come along on the ride and see where it takes them and learn more about the Aboriginal culture as well.
Kaddish, Maddish, cooling off big jam. Kaddish, can you have moon up quality cooling? Now I'm here, you're cooling. But I'm wearing water now. Marwa, Buddha, you are Buddha, Nana, Julie, Nijagnin. Mosman Park, Primary,
Fantastic. Thank you, Mosman Park Primary School. You set the bar high for many other schools to follow in your footsteps. We now return to Bulabartip, where the Karla Hart dancers continue to share their story of fire.
When I was little, we were always told not to play with fire at night because it's Wiradjuri and bad spirits will come. Bad spirits will come. Fire at night. Always ate around the fire. Old people would tell you yarns around the fire. It was a happy place. Karla, 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 walla, walla, you, walla, walla. Karla, 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 walla, walla, you, walla, walla. Karla, 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 walla, walla, you, walla, walla, you. Karla, 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 walla, walla, you, walla, walla, you. Walla, walla.
A huge thank you again to the wonderful Karla Hart dancers for delivering us such a captivating performance. And to the children from Mosman Park Primary School, your commitment towards national reconciliation is something to really be proud of. You set a great example for others to follow in your tracks. The children who joined us this morning are now heading on to other reconciliation activities, but thank you so much for being with us today. Before we commence our next segment with our Regional Voices discussion panel, we will journey north to meet the rangers and elders who are working on country and guiding us on traditional fire burning practices. Let's go on country with the rangers, thanks to the Kimberley Land Council.
For the old people, fire was a matter of survival. It wasn't something that you used or controlled, it was just a part of being one with the landscape. Fire is a necessity.
The way that we do fire management is really trying to emulate what Aboriginal people have been doing for thousands of years. Burn early when it's nice and cool, the grass is wet, less intense fires, small patches of burned and unburned vegetation, basically to break up the country and create these cells. So if a fire starts in the middle of one of them, it can't spread to the next. That country broken up in that way prevents the spread of large late season wildfires. We're using small helicopters or small planes with an incendiary machine. As we fly over the area that we're targeting, we're just dropping lots of little incendiary caps and they start little small fires all over the place.
Having that early burning doesn't kill the animals and the plants and the trees, which is bush tucker and bush medicine for us. Since the ranger's been doing it, you can see life coming back through the earth, you know? You can see the change.
Our people have been doing it for thousands of years. Now people are starting to understand why traditional burning is important. People are starting to notice that burning that's done in the Kimberley is making an impact.
With better fire regimes, less destructive fires, less emissions, we earn carbon credits through the fire program. It's that difference between what used to be emitted when the landscape was unmanaged.
Country gives and you give back. This carbon project will not only benefit now, but benefit into the future. It's getting our own people, no matter who you are, it's that empowerment, not only as a group, but as an individual. And where did that all come from? KLC itself.
It's not just about fire management. One of the core aims is engagement with Indigenous people and sort of empowering them to do meaningful work on their country.
Traditional owners themselves actually coming out and burning the country that maybe no one in their family had since their grandparents. That's something that's really come about because of this that I don't think you can put a dollar value on.
Fires can destroy, they can really destroy. But if it's done the right way, it actually helps the country to grow, to come back.
Fire has been a theme today, and thank you to our Aboriginal Rangers for the work they're doing caring for country. I'd like to welcome our 2022 Regional Voices discussion panel joining us today to provide a regional lens on this year's Be Brave, Make Change. Welcome to Reconciliation WA board member Irina Catalini and co-chair Gary Smith, who will facilitate this discussion. And I'm pleased to welcome our panellists, Menang Unju elder from the Noongar Nation, Carol Peterson from the Great Southern, Ngarmal man Danny Brown from the Pilbara, Bardi man Tyrone Garstone from the Kimberley, and Nalia man Kato Muir from Leonora, Wangaja Nation. Over to you, Gary and Irina, to explore the reconciliation voices from the regions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to this panel with myself and panellist Irina Catalini. What we're going to do is ask each of these panellists to give a short intro and then talk to their challenge. Carol Pedersen, we'll turn to you first, Carol. If you could give a little intro, and what we're all here wanting to hear is what is the regional issue that you think confronts you the most, and you've got a little bit of time to talk to us about that.
Kaya. Look, I think the first thing I want to say is that be brave, make the change is a manta ray that I have grown up with for 80 years. Way back in the 1930s, my white father and tribal Aboriginal mother got together and got married against all social laws and rules. They were hounded and Dad was jailed for being married to an Aboriginal woman. But we grew up learning to be brave, learning to make changes. And today, that is the manta ray that runs through our family, the culture. The biggest challenges out in the region, I think, is like, whilst today we've
Perhaps
had a wonderful opportunity.
Talk to the region as well. Where are you from? Yeah.
I am from Albany in Western Australia, Menang country. My background is also linked into Ngaju country. But the challenges that we face out there today, even though it's been a wonderful opportunity to celebrate this today, there is a dark place for our young people out in the regions. There are things happening out there that is about, I think it's about the imaging that people have about our young people. In general, they just cannot see past the negative image of our young people. And things like our kids cannot even walk into a street, into a shop without being followed by security, their bags being checked. There is just this negative image of our Aboriginal people, and I think reconciliation will never be truly achieved until racism is addressed. Racism can only be addressed by changing the imaging and changing the language that is used to create that image.
So, Carol, what would you actually have us do if we see elements of this racism in action? What would you have us do that you think is braver than we have been before?
Well, I think every agencies, and I like the reconciliation itself has gone back on a review. We need to look inward, we need to change the focus and look inward to what are we doing back in the workplace, back in the social scene. What are we doing there? What is it that our children are suffering from? We hear about suicide. Well, where is that coming from? I can tell you here and now, racism is an insidious disease that is killing our children. And so we need to have a look, what is happening? It's happening in the school grounds, it's happening. I've had a teacher say to me about a child that I was nurturing, that kid will never achieve because he's Aboriginal. That was said to me. But being the person that I am, the manta ray that I grew up about being brave and making changes, I went and addressed that. And that child now is a successful adult. So we need to get down to ground level. We need to start looking inward, refocus and have a look. What are we doing in the workplace?
And we actually talk about not just personal confronting racism, but institutional racism. Is that to blame as well?
It is. It's systemic. It's a systemic issue out there. The language that's used. For instance, I have been, in society we talk about somebody that's a champion. They're, working in the community. Yet I have been seen as because I want to make changes, I've been seen as a troublemaker. I like that. I love it. I love it because if it means making changes, I like being a troublemaker. I like being a noisemaker.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
We like it too, Aunty Carol, thank you. So we've just had a wonderful keynote presentation from Stan Grant, who asked us to think about where we are. So over to you, Danny. Tell us about where you're from and what the big challenge is in that region.
Yeah, Wayuru, Yuralu, Waiba, Wandiwa,
Tānaru. Greetings from the Pilbara region, also known as the Ngarangali Yandu region. My name is Danny Brown. I am the co-chair of the Pilbara Aboriginal Voice. I am also the CEO for Nyamal Aboriginal Corporation, and I sit on the Aboriginal Advisory Council WA. One of the important areas that is stemming from the Pilbara region is around leadership. There's a strong push from my people to have a leadership group, a regional leadership group that represents the people of the region. The group will unify the region, and it be an opportunity through a coordination approach, also by representatives from the region to talk about community issues that are stemming from our region.
And what role can you see us playing more broadly, those of us who are part of the reconciliation movement or would like to get involved in supporting this leadership effort in your community? Well,
The leadership group needs to be recognised and be supported and be committed by both the state and Commonwealth government.
And it sounds like there's a number of you already brave enough to be taking that journey. What else can you see the Be Brave, Make Change call to action this year? How can you see that looking in your community, and how can people get on board with that?
Very easy. It's about working together, getting a unified position, and being recognised to talk about issues that are coming out from our Aboriginal communities.
Sounds like it's also a job for us to be listening then as well. You're taking that brave step of providing that leadership, and I think we all look forward to sitting and listening and learning the example that's set by the leaders in your community. So thank you for being part of this journey.
And Tyrone, from the Kimberley, I would like to understand your key issue, but tell us a little bit about that lovely part of the world and where you're from and what you would like to talk to today.
My name is Tyrone Garston. I'm the CEO of the Kimberleys. Where I'm from, it's a beautiful landscape. We think it's the best place in Australia, but obviously we're very biased in that opinion. For us, like many different regions, there's lots of challenges. It's from suicide to lack of housing to poor health. But these are just symptoms of a larger issue, and that's the system failure that we're seeing, and the lack of recognition of Indigenous voices in and around law reform, around policy development, and development of also projects as well. We're constantly seeing how governments and also the broader Australia are making decisions on our behalf and not truly listening to us. We hear buzzwords such as co-design, but really our voices are being watered down. We talked about 3 days ago was this 2-year anniversary of Duke and Gorge. The WA government has gone through a process around legislative reform around the Heritage Act. And again, we have fears that Aboriginal voices will not be heard when we're trying to protect these heritage and cultural areas.
And so we're talking about an environment of trust that you would like to see. Tyrone, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. Part of being brave, an element of that is trust. We need Australia to trust us, that we can make decisions for ourselves, and that regional decisions and projects and programs really do work. We need to ensure that Australia can trust us in regards to giving us the power to be able to make decisions on our behalf. And we as Indigenous people need to trust you to give us that power as well. But also we need you to trust us when we are calling on a voice into Parliament. And again, our latest Prime Minister that commitment to a national voice is integral to trying to change some of these system areas that we are currently seeing on the ground in the regions.
And we've heard throughout today, Tyrone, some of the very sorry parts of our history that have undermined and broken that trust in the past. Have you got any thoughts or advice around how we can rebuild the trust?
Look, I want to put it out there to all Australians. We're proud of our history. Our Indigenous people in Australia want to live in a prosperous Australia. We want to share this country with you as a one nation. However, don't fear that we're going to hold the history, the true history of this country against you. It's about acknowledging and embracing it. And really, I think by acknowledging that, we will be a better country.
Thanks, Tyrone. I think that's a really generous comment to share with us all today, and I think it also reflects the generosity of the invitation in the Uluru Statement from the Heart that does invite all Australians to come on this journey. So a really lovely message for you to share. Thank you.
I've got one final question, because I think governments have a huge role to play here, Tyrone. When you're talking about trust, what is it that you're seeking from governments who have, for a long time now, provided services that were thought to be the best, but perhaps without the consultation? What is it that helps bridge that gap?
Look, I think the systems that we're seeing is now, and again, I go back to the commitment from the Prime Minister in regards to the Uluru Statement. We've been consistent in our messaging to the government, is to allow us, we are best placed to make the system designs, to develop the policy, to develop the laws that will make change in our regions. And really that's what it's embodying, is to say that regional governance that leads into national governance is the best way forward of trying to resolve a lot of the issues we're facing in the remotes. And again, bringing Australia together as a collective.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tyrone. So, Cato, we'd love to hear a little bit about yourself and about where you're from and what the big challenge is out there in the goldfields.
Yo abara nanga ni kaira na linoro dano kagarawana kwaringa wanga go wanga the brinego yanango go ngairo mero mana kiwer go dano nondo na ba kape go ngora go pajalgo an kware go wanga go kiwer go brinego yanango brinego. Yeah, so I'm Cato Muir, I'm from Leonora in the Goldfields. I just had a special message there to people from Kiwirrkura. Our region is the biggest region in Western Australia, extending from the border right across down to Esperance and across to the Southern Cross. Oh, not Southern Cross, but halfway there. And in our region we have some of the last people to come out of the desert, both into Junjunjara and into Kiwirrkura, and also a long contact history with settlers and white Australia. And I made a special mention of Kiwirrkura because I've had a meeting with them this week. They're looking for housing. They want houses. After the big floods where they were evacuated and became refugees in their own country, they came down to the goldfields and stayed in our communities. And they still have the same houses there. And we have water. So Kiwirrkura people can't drink water from the tap. That's an issue. Why is it that a basic human right today that people cannot access drinking water from the tap? So we had the Minister attend today, talk about reconciliation. These are real issues. So there are service level issues that we need to address, which are about the delivery of basic human rights to our people. But there's the fundamental issue. We have also had in our audience today the future governor of Western Australia. If you want to be brave and affect change, change the institutional structures that inhibit us, that make us a lesser society and a lesser people. We're still a colony. We still have the British flag, and Western Australia has the opportunity to chart its own course. We are a federation in Australia. We have a constitution developed in 1890. This constitution is long overdue. I'm not interested in talking about reconciliation. I'm not interested in talking about voices to Parliament. What I'm interested in is real change to the laws and the frameworks that underwrite our relationship. Rewrite the Constitution, renegotiate the relationship between the settler state and the First Nations, and on that basis, on an equal power sharing relationship, then we can chart a future that's of our own design. That's my story.
It's a very brave aspiration there, Cato. Tell us more about how you think the pathway can look to address those challenges, the real live immediate challenges now for services, things like housing and clean drinking water, at the same time as something quite intangible or but that may seem like a real stretch to be able to rethink the constitution of Western Australia. How do we walk those two paths?
We have breakfast tables out there filled with people who are decision makers. They need to make the decisions. They need to get out there and make it happen. I don't need to be here calling for it. It's part of their job. So that's service delivery. Let's step back and address the rights. And in the institutional makeup that is a relationship between the settler state and the First Nations, that's the real big, brave challenge. All the other stuff is business as usual. You've got to change the way the services are delivered. We've got the resources, we've got the surplus budget, we have these, we've got the money to do it. It's just the gumption, the be brave, make change, and that's just service delivery. I'm interested in reform at the heart of what the relationship between the settler state and the First Nations are.
Thank you. I think it reminds us of a message that was shared with us in Reconciliation Week last year, which was from Dr. Anne Paulina up in the Tyrone's country. If you have the capacity, you have a duty. And I think, as you've reminded us, everyone here today in the room or joining us from around the state has immense capacity, and that does create this duty that we have to act.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, we have Minister Buti, we have the future Governor, Mr. Dawson. It's our responsibility as citizens of this country, collectively, to get behind them and to support them and get them to effect the change.
Would any of the other panellists like to reflect on this question of our capacity and ability to actually make this change happen? Aunty Carol?
Yeah, I'd like to comment. And as Cato has illuminated there, it's the service delivery that's at the cold face. That is not being done. There are too many, I don't know, I think the public service sector has to be renewed somehow. It has to be reviewed, because I come from a public service background, and there were things that I wanted to do for my people, but I couldn't because of the delegated structure in there. I was successful in raising a family. I come from a successful background, and yet I could not apply common sense to assisting and servicing our people. So the public service structure really needs to be reviewed. Now, I know there's a review that was done recently, and it was about teaching them, but it wasn't about how do you apply the mandate. If somebody wants help, how do you really, really do it? How do you make those changes? And it's a public service structure that is inhibiting that. And so, you know, they do have a mandate, and they're not, it's not being executed. You know, we talk about the tap there. What, in this day and age, people, although I must say, Cato, I love drinking groundwater. I love drinking out of the ground and the rock holes and things like that. But it's the execution of some of those mandates.
And if I could add, regional voices need to be heard. Government needs to support and resource adequately structures for regional voices to be heard, and what that looks like.
And perhaps, because it's also on Tyrone's theme of self-determination, but Danny, what is that beginning of that discussion? If you had the power, the ability to do it now, what would you start with?
Well, looking at a model that's going to be effective, meaningful partnership with the government, and a commitment, a strong commitment from government, what that's going to look like, because we can't do that unless we have strong partnership with the government to make it happen.
Thank you. Tyrone, anything to add?
Yeah, look, I take on where Cato's coming from, and for us, that's the utopia position. It really is. And I think if you have a look at the history of Australia and us as Indigenous people in this country, we've had incremental change, and I really do like the theme we're coming from, be brave, and that messaging coming from Cato is great. You know, that's, you know, if you were to say that if we had a magic wand where we would want to be, that's where we would be. But I am also pragmatic in my thinking and how we need to bring people on this journey of trying to change their mind and where we're trying to head. If you think about Australia as a country, we spend over $30 billion on Indigenous affairs trying to work with us. However, less than 10 to 15% of that money actually hits the ground where it needs to be hit. And that's because we aren't getting a say. We don't have any input in regards to the design of the policy, in regards to the designs of the laws, and actually given an opportunity to roll out the programs on the ground in the regions.
And this is a message that we've been hearing for quite some time, this notion of needing to give Aboriginal people and communities more direct control over the choices of how resources and services are provided in their communities.
Well,
so,
I have one more observation for the people of Western Australia. I come from the goldfields. At one stage, Kalgoorlie sought to secede from Western Australia and form a state called Aurelia. It's the movement and the power of the people to effect change. Aurelia resulted in Western Australia joining the Federation of Australia, resulted in the railroads, resulted in the pipeline, resulted in votes for women. So it's basically on us as people to mobilise, take action, hold our government and our bureaucrats to account, and design the society in the future we want to live in.
Particularly with the government's Aboriginal empowerment strategy, however you want to think of that, in terms of there is a willingness to engage in a way to give Aboriginal people finally that first voice of self-determination in the future.
That's absolutely the case. It's the case that everyone wants to do it, that we want to bring about change.
Yeah.
But we're all waiting for someone else to do it.
Yeah, and looking at when it gets tough, and that's when you really prove yourself. So I think the government does have that challenge in front of it as well. So yeah, it's important. And what I would also add there, Gary, is to say that we can't be playing the blame game. We can't keep using the state and the Commonwealth to play off against each other. You know, what we're calling from is a united front. It should be a tri-party agreement between both the Commonwealth, the states, and the local regions. Well, thank you. I mean, this is a bit of a groundbreaking, brave move for Reconciliation WA to be talking to people from the regions, and I can see from this morning's chat we've just scratched the surface of the type of discussion that we could have. But it's wonderful to hear views, and not surprisingly, not all the same views as some people talking about something as insidious and confronting as racism, others at a major constitutional level. So, and that's as we should expect. So, thank you. I'm going to ask Irina to close the session.
I think, Aunty Carol, you said best early on that this call to be brave and take action is really a responsibility for all of us to think internally in the organisations that we're involved with or work with or volunteer with, in our own lives, our families, our homes. What does this look like for us? How can we be part of making change happen and tackling the barriers that hold us back? I think, Cato, you've reinforced that message by saying it is up to all of us. We can't wait for somebody else to lead. We all have to be leaders in this space. Where we have capacity, we have this duty to be brave and to stand up and make this happen. So thank you all very much for sharing these messages today. I'm sure the people who are joining us in their thousands from around the state have really enjoyed being part of the conversation, and really appreciate you helping Reconciliation WA to make our work in this space meaningful across the whole state, not just here in Noongar country, but where you've all joined us from the Goldfields, the Kimberley, the South Coast and the Pilbara. So once again, thanks for being part of the discussion, and I hope you all enjoy Reconciliation Week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panel for an enlightening and thought-provoking conversation. Open discussion is the only way forward if we're going to truly be brave and make change. Irina and Gary, thank you for helping start the conversation and for involving everyone. As we come to the end of today's breakfast, I'd like to invite Jodie Nunn and Gary Smith to take this opportunity to share their thoughts and close our Reconciliation WA breakfast for 2022. Thank you to everyone for being here today, and from me for the opportunity to host this event. It's been an absolute honour. Over to you, Gary and Jodie.
What an amazing host you've been today, taking us through an incredibly dynamic program. Thank you. And what a way to commence National Reconciliation Week this week with so many beautiful elements. And it seems incredible that just in the last week, the response to the federal election with the powerful commitment to the Uluru Statement from the Heart and what this will mean for the reconciliation movement in Australia. I acknowledge those who have worked so hard for the movement here and right around the country, particularly our elders who have shown such grace, patience, resilience and strength. We thank you for your continuing guidance and effort. The week ahead has many activities to engage in, and I encourage you all to head to Reconciliation WA's website or check out the resources on Reconciliation Australia's website. We've asked you all to be brave and make change because we believe that reconciliation is everyone's business. And of course, this week is more than a week. It is the start of the year ahead to refocus on your reconciliation journey and to make sure it's a priority in both your home and your organisation. And our call out is, in Western Australia, with the wealth, prosperity, innovation and will, we should be global leaders in reconciliation. We must ensure that this generation of Aboriginal children can achieve all their hopes and dreams. Thank you again to our partners for their support. We could not have delivered the many events this week without you. And I now welcome Reconciliation Co-Chair Gary Smith to say a few words. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Jodie. I join Jodie in thanking you all for joining us today. It's been an incredible response to a bold call for action. I've got two final announcements to make today. The first is that we are launching Reconciliation WA's own Reflect Reconciliation Action Plan, which is a wonderful thing for us to do. As the peak body, we're not beyond having our own reconciliation journey, and this Reflect plan allows us to do just that. We must hold ourselves accountable as the peak body for actually conducting our own Reconciliation Action Plan. Secondly, you'll be shortly hearing about Project Respect from us. Stan Grant softly demanded change from his speech, and as our children have shown, bravery can be natural and it takes us to reconciliation. We want to actually move towards what the state is defining as reconciliation by asking stakeholders all over the state and listening deeply to the Aboriginal and reconciliation community about what bold is and what brave horizons can be defined together to determine the future of the reconciliation movement in WA. As your peak body, we will look forward to listening deeply to that feedback. Today, I thank you to all of you for virtually joining us here. Your presence and support is important. It provides the foundation for the growing movement of reconciliation across our state. And don't forget, as a little plug, if you haven't already, please join up as a member. To conclude this morning's breakfast, we have a special performance by Noongar singer-songwriter Joel Davis, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us to launch National Reconciliation Week. Remember, be brave, make change. Thank you.
Bathed in moon vibes and salt water till sunrise. Solving everything, receiving what you see. Blue, blue, just like the moon. Turn up just with your crew. It should have served you wrong. When you blend in ambience, you glow in ambience. Safely now placed in the hands of the moon. And what you now face is a deep summer peace. Gonna bring you back, it's gonna bring you back home. It's gonna bring you back, it's gonna bring you back home. And tell the ones you love, tell the ones you don't, you're going home. And tell the ones you love, tell the ones you don't, you're going home. We pay, we pay, we salt water till sunrise. Soften everything, receiving what you seek. Safely now placed in the hands of the moon. And what you now face is a deep summer peace. Gonna bring you back, it's gonna bring you back home. It's gonna bring you back, it's gonna bring you back home. And tell the ones you love, tell the ones you don't.